Welcome back. So I mentioned earlier on this morning that that morning session was the most important session because of the foundation. This is my favorite topic, dinosaurs. So this is something that I have been researching on for a long time. But why talk about dinosaurs? Because I believe that these creatures actually used to promote the idea of evolution, perhaps more than any other creature. So you know, by now we have a website called creation.com, and this is a picture of me in my office. And I have a younger son who is not in this picture, but who would like to have dinosaurs in the office? Okay, so you can tell now that I love dinosaurs. So why talk about dinosaurs? Well, people have questions like that. I mean, have you ever wondered, do dinosaurs prove evolution? And does the Bible even say anything about dinosaurs? What do the fossils tell us? Again, I'm going to show you from dinosaur fossils. You're going to see evidence of the flood all around. And then I'm going to show you dinosaur artifacts to show you that these creatures were around until more recent years. They only went extinct in more recent years. And that people from cultures all around the world were actually engraving things that look exactly like what we would call dinosaurs today. They were actually called dragons. And my question to you is, could it be that the dragons of the past, some of them are really just talking about dinosaurs? And then we're going to look at one of the most exciting areas of creation research, soft tissue. Dinosaur soft tissue. By the way, when I say soft tissue, I'm not talking about soft body parts that turn into stone. In this talk, when I say soft tissue, I'm talking about original biomolecules, protein, dinosaur protein, DNA, red blood cells that are still present in a dinosaur bone. That tells you that these things cannot be millions of years old. But before I start, let me introduce to you my favorite movie. I mean, you know my favorite volcano? Now my favorite movie, Jurassic Park, right? So, and of course, the latest movie, they make this creature even bigger. They call it in the Jurassic World series. So Jurassic Park fans, where are you? Or Jurassic World fans, where are you? Okay, lots of you. So here's a question for you. What is the name of this dinosaur? Anybody? I heard, yes, Pyroraptor. A few of you got it right. That's right, Pyroraptor. So if you didn't watch the movie, this huge creature, right, with huge feathers in this cold, wintry area, chase after these two people here, dive under the ice, it's a frozen lake, chase them under the ice, circle them around the ice, they jump up of the ice, jump the air, glide, and chase after them. Very amazing, right? Well, that's just a movie. The real Pyroraptor is believed to be about this size, around your knee. Ignore the bird-like features that they're putting in there, the black part. The only bones that we have are the bones that are in white. And from those four small bones of a creature about that size, they make that huge creature and they put that into Jurassic World. That tells you, hey friends, maybe the movies aren't exactly what happened in reality. You see, when I think about dinosaurs, people go to movies, they go to the colleges, they learn about dinosaurs being evidence of millions of years. And perhaps more than any other creature, dinosaurs have been used to promote the idea of evolution. But you say, I'm not influenced by the culture around me. I just start with the Bible. Is that true? Well, answer this question. When I say the word dinosaur, what's the first image that comes to mind? T-Rex. Some of you have this image of a volcano in the background and strange-looking plants on another side. Do you have the image in your mind? Why do you have the image? You see, whether you realize it or not, most of us are already subconsciously influenced by the culture around us. That's why we think of dinosaurs this way. I hope that at the end of this talk, when you think about dinosaurs, you don't think of these strange-looking images in your mind, because dinosaurs actually support what the Bible says much better. But if you believe in the Big Bang and evolutionary story, this is what they'll tell you. 13.7 billion years ago, there was the Big Bang, and then the planets formed. That's called cosmic evolution. And then from that primordial soup, the first life come about. That's called chemical evolution. And from that one living cell, it evolved into all other life forms that we see today. That's called biological evolution. But the Bible presents to us a very different picture. The Bible says about 6,000 years ago, God created the world in 6 days. There was a real Adam and Eve. And when they fell into sin, they brought sin, death, and suffering into this world. And later on, God sent a worldwide flood, right? And the flood, as we saw today, caused most of the fossils that we see today. And of all the people, only the 3 sons of Noah and their families, and of course Noah and his wife, 8 of them went on to repopulate the world. And later on, during the days of, in the Tower of Babel, God confused the languages, and that is where the nations spread out all over the world today. Friends, the Bible tells us a very different picture of history compared to what we see in the evolutionary story. So like I said earlier in this morning, when you pull back the curtain, it always boils down to this one question. What is your authority? Do you believe the Word of God? Right? That's why we're talking about this. See, dinosaurs, as I said, has been used to promote the idea of evolution more than any other creatures. By Creation Ministries, we like to say that dinosaurs are missionary lizards. So why do we say that? Because this creature has been used to promote the idea of evolution. We believe that when you train yourself in this area, you can use this as a stepping stone to engage your friends in the conversation and then introduce the gospel from there. So when we talk about dinosaurs, we need to train ourselves to think starting from the Bible. So again, I know we love quiz. Answer this. T-Rex, its teeth is really sharp, right? 6 inches long. What was its original diet? Who say plants? Who says meat? Okay, who says plant and meat? Okay, I kind of addressed that this morning, but what does the Bible say? The Bible says it's plants, right? And this morning we show you from Genesis 1:30. It says, to every beast of the earth and to every bird of the heavens and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I've given every green plant for food. And it was so. So at the beginning, God created all creatures to eat green plants. And later on, after sin entered the world, only then some of them begin to eat meat. Remember, at the end of creation week, God saw all he had made, and it was very good. There was no death, no disease, no suffering. But you say to me, oh, come on, look at these huge creatures. The teeth is so sharp. Surely it ate meat, right? I mean, like this cartoon say, come on, look at these fangs. Look at these claws. Do you think we're just supposed to eat honey and berries? Well, let me introduce to you bears. So here we have 6 different types of bears. The polar bear, brown bear, grizzly bear. So let's start first. What does the polar bear eat? Meat, right? Mostly seals and meat. What about the brown bear or grizzly bear? Eat berries, but also eats fish. So fish and meat. Plants and meat. What about the sun bear? He eats termites, eats fruits, honey, lots of honey, and a little bit of meat, but mostly a plant diet. What about the panda? What does it eat? Bamboo, that's right. Now it gets really hard. The spectacled bear, this strange-looking bear, what does it eat? Anybody knows? Well, this is in South America, and only 6% of its diet is from eating meat. It eats mainly fruits, cactus, palm leaf, and orchids. And then the last one, the sloth bear. This is in India. It eats mainly termites and ants, and a little bit of tropical fruits, like sugar cane and mangoes. And what you're seeing here is 6 different types of bears with 6 very different diets. But when you look at their skull, guess what? They all have the same sharp teeth. See, just because you have sharp teeth doesn't mean you have to eat meat. It just gives you a clue, an estimated guess of what its original diet could have been. And we know from the Bible, they all eat plants, and some of them begin to eat meat later on. But they all have the same sharp teeth. I'm sure you've all heard of the term adaptation. Now we have the term adaptation. What's that? This is the idea that the same creature can use the same tools for multiple purposes. The strong jaw is good for crushing the head of a seal today. It's good for crushing tough plant material. The same thing about the bamboo, right? Or a bamboo for a panda. And the same claws that's good for clubbing a seal on its head is going to be effective for collecting berries from a tree. If you go to a zoo, this is what the signboard tells you. It says, although all bears have teeth designed for eating meat, their diet mainly consists of plants. So the same way with the dinosaurs. Most of them actually, if all of them actually ate plants at the beginning, and later on some of them begin to eat meat after sin entered the world. And the ones that eat meat, these are the theropod dinosaurs, the one with big legs and small arms. Scientists tell us today that slightly more than half of them actually ate plants. Slightly more than half. But wait, if I say slightly more than half, that means some of them later on begin to eat what? Meat, right? So if they are created to eat plants, And then some of them begin to eat meat. How do we know that? How do we know what they eat? Well, sometimes you can look at the teeth marks, as you saw earlier on, from the T-Rex, the bone with T-Rex tooth in there. You can actually look at the teeth that make those marks. You can match the size of the spacing. You can even know what species made those teeth marks. And we know at the time of the flood, as you saw earlier this morning, some creatures had already begun to eat one another. Another way we know what they eat is by looking at the droppings, fossil dung. And the fossil display at the back, I have two different fossil dung that you can see over there. And when we look at that, sometimes we see bone fragments. And we know that by the time of the flood, because that's what caused the fossils, by the time of the flood, some dinosaurs were actually eating one another. But we also see what was in some of these things, and they contained grass. And that was a surprise. Because for evolutionists, for many years, they used to say that grass did not come to existence until 10 million years after dinosaurs died out. But when you look at dinosaur droppings, we find grass in there. And so for a period of 10 years, evolutionists had to throw out the origin of grass 3 times, doubling in age, because they keep finding things in the droppings that, according to them, had not yet come to existence. But I said that most of the fossils that we see are evidence of a worldwide flood. Well, what does the evidence show you? Well, we show you this morning that if you go to a book or museum and say a dinosaur dies, sinks to the bottom, over millions of years is buried, and that's how you get, for example, a fossil. And we show you this morning that, like in this pic here, you cannot get well intact fossil forming over long periods of time. So just to recap, this same pic 7 days later, the bones are reduced to what you see here, all scattered about. Look at that, from small marine scavengers. Yet in the fossil record, we have huge dinosaurs, very well preserved, with all the bones intact, like this one that you see here. And these two dinosaurs were fighting together, and something happened so quickly that they're forever stuck in that fighting pose, fighting like that. The dinosaur on the left has bitten off the arm of the velociraptor on the right. And the velociraptor on the right has its claw in the neck of the dinosaur on the left. And they were fighting, and something happened so quickly they're forever preserved, buried, frozen in time. Is that millions of years? They're known as the fighting dinosaurs of Mongolia, Inner Mongolia. They are in the Gobi Desert today. How do you get that? This is an artist's impression of what happened before they were buried in flood sediments in a short period of time, in the middle of the Gobi Desert in Inner Mongolia in Asia. You see, friends, what will you expect to see if there's a worldwide flood? Fossils buried in rock layers rapidly all over the world. And that's exactly what we see. So if you're a dinosaur geek like me, you know that one of the best places to find dinosaur bones, you go to these places called dinosaur bone beds. And what are these? These are places where you have tens of thousands of dinosaur bones, and they're all buried together. Tens of thousands of dinosaurs all buried together in one huge pile. And the bones are all mixed together with marine fossils. Sometimes we find clams and fish in there. How do you get something like that? Surely all these dinosaurs did not say, hey, let's all die together in one huge one corner, right? So how do you get their bones like that? And why would their bones be mixed with marine fossils? But if you have water sorting action, a worldwide flood, the water sorting action will bring all these carcasses from huge area together and sorting them out according to the weight and other properties, and then quickly burying them in huge piles. And that's the only way you're going to get huge dinosaur bone beds like this, mixed with marine fossils and other things. In Canada alone, there are more than 24 of such bone beds. Some of these bone beds, the bones are sort of aligned in one direction as if they're being laid down in flowing water. They go 1 square mile in one direction, and then they shift another square mile in another direction. Friends, you're looking at a worldwide flood. No local flood will give you things like that. So the next thing I'm going to show you I'm going to show you some fossils of dinosaurs. Okay, I want you to see if you can notice what all these pictures share in common. Can we do that? Okay, here's one. What do they share in common? Here's another one. Yeah, I heard somebody say that the necks and tails are bent backwards in opposite direction. Right, this is so well known. This is called the opistotonic death pose, or the death pose. And when we find these dinosaurs that have a long necks and the bones are intact, very often the bones are found in this direction. No creature sleeps like this. So why do we find their bones like that? Well, a number of years ago, a researcher decided to do something. She realized that these creatures that have a long neck, they have a ligament that runs down the back of the neck that allows them to pull back the neck. All right? And we know that chickens, they have a long neck, and they have a ligament that runs down the back of the neck as well. And so what she did, she took freshly killed chickens. And see, when these chickens are alive, the weight of the body and such, it doesn't bend back that way. But she took freshly killed chickens, and she threw them in cold water. So the chickens, before they can harden, she threw them in cold water, and within seconds, that ligament contracts, and all the heads take on the exact same pose. And she did the same thing on big birds like emus, and the same thing happened. But the moment she cut the ligament, it no longer bent back. So we know what caused it. It's a contraction of the ligament while it is suspended in water. And she says this: although the roads, the opistotonic death pose are many, immersion in water is the simplest explanation. Friends, the reason why we find bone beds all around the world is because at the time of death, they were in water. The reason why we find dinosaurs like that, the long necks, bend backwards in opposite direction, is because at the time of death, they were in water. You see where I'm going with that? Here's another one. What about armored dinosaurs? Armored dinosaurs don't have a long neck, right? They can't walking around like that. So how do we find their bones? In 2017, National Geographic declared that they found the best preserved armored dinosaur of its kind. This is so well preserved. It was preserved in three-dimensional shape with the armor. Okay? It says partially mineralized, that means not completely turned into stone. Three-dimensional preservation, remnants of its last meal, we know what it eats in its stomach, patches of skin, reddish pigment, and dinosaur armor. And this huge creature that you see here, this believed to be 3,000 pounds, was washed away by a flood river, and this is what caught my attention. They said that this creature was buried upside down. Upside down. I got excited. Why? Because this was in June 2017. I remember just 1 month before that, I saw another publication that also claimed to found another dinosaur, the best preserved one of its kind again. And this is Ankylosaurus. This is the armored dinosaur that has a club at the end of the tail. And this one, again, three-dimensional preservation, abundant soft tissue preservation across the skeleton, including bony skin armor, skin impression, and keratin. That's protein. And notice what you say. Again, the skeleton was buried, what? Upside down. So you can tell why I got excited. I knew that they were seeing something here. But I wasn't the only one. Because by September, so May, June, and just a few months in September, secular scientists, another group, published another paper because they had the exact same thoughts as I have. So they look at all the armored dinosaurs that they find in Canada. And guess what? 70% of all of them are actually found upside down. So they begin to look at the balance. And they realize that these creatures, because of the armor, they're very unstable, they're top-heavy. And when you place them in water, they will float, but all you need is for a small wave to come along, and they will all go turtle up. And they say this: we use computer modeling to show that Ankylosaurus likely flipped over while suspended in water. Friends, welcome to the worldwide flood. Dinosaurs testify to the flood. When we start looking at God's word through the Bible, everything changes. So what does the Bible say? Does the Bible talk about dinosaurs at all? When were they created? Well, the Bible tells us that God created all the land creatures on the sixth day. Dinosaurs are land creatures. He created man on the sixth day, which means that when you start with the word of God, dinosaurs and man live together. And dinosaurs only went extinct in more recent years. If the fall did not happen, something like that could have been very possible. But let's ask another question. Is the word dinosaur itself in the Bible? No, right? Why? Well, the word dinosaur is actually a very new word. Are you aware of that? It's coined in 1841 by Sir Richard Owen. But the early translations of the Bible from Greek and Hebrew were hundreds of years before that. So, of course, you don't find the word dinosaurs in those older Bibles because those words were not yet coined. But the Bible does describe an animal in Job chapter 40. Let's take a look at that. In Job chapter 40, remember Job is complaining to God, and now God comes along, he responds, and he says, Job, look at my creation. Look at what I did here. Look at what I did there. Can you give me an answer? And it comes to Job chapter 40, an animal that was still alive during the time of Job, that Job was familiar with. Look at what it says. It says, look at Behemoth. So it was around when Job was there. Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. Wait a minute. Remember what I said about dinosaur droppings? They contain grass, right? Hey, science has just caught up with the Bible here. But let's continue. What strength is in his loin? What power in the muscle of his belly? His tail moves like a cedar. His sinews and thighs are close knit. His bones are like tubes of bronze. His limbs like rods of iron. He ranks first among the works of God. The largest land creature that God created that eats grass like an ox has a tail like a cedar. What's a cedar? A tree. The cedar of Lebanon was so big that they were used to build the pillars in King Solomon's palace. So what land creature eats grass like an ox, has a tail like a cedar tree? What's that? You know, some Bible commentators, they put a footnote, Behemoth at the bottom, say, oh, maybe it's a hippopotamus. Maybe it's an elephant. Okay, so in fact, in the Chinese Bible, they actually translate Behemoth. They don't put Behemoth. They call that a hippo. But it's a bad translation. So what's a behemoth? Some hippo, some say elephant. Let's give that a try. A tail the size of a cedar tree. Does it match? What about this? See, there's only one animal that fits this description in Job chapter 40. One of the long-necked cephalopods dinosaurs. If you don't believe me, the next time you're at a zoo, take a few pictures for yourself. And what's that? A tiny little flap there. That's not a behemoth, right? There's only one animal that fits the description that we see in Job chapter 40. But that raises another question. If Job was familiar with dinosaurs in his day, when did Job live? Was it before the flood or after the flood? After the flood. How do we know that? Well, there are a few passages that talk about how God had judged the wicked with a worldwide flood. And by the way, in Job, the Bible actually tells us he had 4 friends, right? And the 4 counselors, the Bible tells us which cities they come from. They come from cities that were founded after the time of Abraham. He's post-Abrahamic. So Job lived after the flood. Job was familiar with dinosaurs in his day, and they only went extinct in more recent years. That means that dinosaurs had to be on the ark. Do you see how changing your starting worldview changes the way you look at dinosaurs? So dinosaurs are land creatures, the reptiles that are on land, walk in the upright position. But before they actually found the land creatures, paleontologists were already familiar with some of the marine reptiles, like the ichthyosaur. That's the big bone that I saw you earlier on. It's on the fossil display now. These creatures. So this is a paleontology book from back then. What do you think they used to call these creatures? The book of the great sea dragons. So could it just be, we know that cultures all around the world talk about dragons. Could it be that many of their depictions are actually depictions of real dragons? In fact, what's interesting that if you go back in time, some of them look very fantastic with wings and all that. So the 6-limbed creatures which we don't see today. But those are more recent. As you go back in time, some of the older depictions tend to show these creatures not as 6-limbed creatures, but as 4-legged reptilian, and they really look like dinosaurs in many of these cases. And could it just be that as time goes by, these creatures become extinct or become more and more rare? So the depictions become more and more fantastic over time. But when you go to the early depictions, they really look very much like some of these dragons, or dinosaurs rather, that we are familiar with today. So this is one example. And what you're looking at here is a water basin from the 3rd century BC in China. And you look at what's on the handle there. What's on the handle? It's a long-necked dinosaur. Looks like a Camarasaurus to me. In fact, this book is not even talking about dinosaurs at all. It's really a book talking about ancient bronze artifacts. And this is just one of the artifacts that is in there. Looks like one of the Camarasaurus. It's a long-necked dinosaur with a very boxy-looking head over there. This book was written in Chinese. It's on my bookshelf in Georgia. When this book got brought to the West, it got translated into English. And the translator did not retain the original translation. You see, in that book, in Chinese, they call that a dragon. In Chinese, the word for dragon is long. Long means dragon. Dinosaur is Kong Long, terrifying dragon. So long and Kong Long. You see the relationship there? This was called a dragon. But when this got brought to the West, the translation didn't translate that as dragon. He called that what? A long-necked feline. A cat. A long-necked cat. Have you ever seen a long-necked cat? I mean, what is a long-necked cat? So why do you think they called that a long-necked cat rather than translating it faithfully as dragon? I think if they call that a dragon, it becomes very obvious to everybody what it's meant to depict. But this is China, right? Maybe it's just China. Let's leave China. Let's go to Cambodia. In Cambodia, we have a World Heritage Site. We know this is real. We have the Angkor Wat Temple Complex, the world's biggest temple complex. And one of the temples that was in there is the Thap Prom Temple, built in the 12th century. Remember, dinosaurs were not discovered until the 1800s. And on the pillar of this temple, we have animal engravings. Water buffaloes, monkeys, swans, parrots, humans, and what's that? Everywhere I go, people tell me that reminds them of a Stegosaurus. So we actually took an imprint, somebody I know took an imprint of that and make a cast, and the cast is on the fossil display at the back. Vance Nelson made that. Look at that. How did they know how to make something like that? Skeptics come along and say, oh, that cannot be a dinosaur because Stegosaurus bones are not found in Cambodia. That, they say, has to be a rhino. Or maybe that is a chameleon. But look at this dinosaur. This dinosaur, the base of the tail is really thick. Look at the rhino. It's like a little rope. And look at the chameleon, the curly tail. It looks completely different. And none of these creatures actually have that plates on the back. So skeptics come along and say, oh, no, those are not meant to be plates on the back, right? They say, oh, those are just artistic. They are leaves that the person tried to draw, engrave in there. They're not part of the creature. The issue with that is that there's actually another Stegosaurus found in this very same temple, but it's very badly faded away. And this second Stegosaurus doesn't have all the artistic features around, but the plates are still there. They're part of the creature. And that's what you're looking at here. So I know this is a bit hard to see, so let me draw in the lines there. You see that? All right? So this time around, it looks very much like a Stegosaurus with an artistic feature, and there's that tapered head that you see over there. So these are the two creatures. This is clearly meant to be depicting Stegosaurus. Friends, like you say, that Stegosaurus fossils are not in Cambodia. It's not like somebody could dig it out and try to reconstruct it. Second thing is that, you see those plates at the back? For the first few decades, paleontologists, when they first found it in the 1800s, they used to think it was flat, like an armored piece, like a turtle shell. So even back then, they were drawing these creatures wrongly. But all the way in the 11th century, it's like 1100s, people were actually engraving these things, as you see over here. Maybe it's just Asia. Let's go to the UK. Let's go to France. Let's go to Europe. In Europe, you have this famous painting, Mona Lisa. Who painted that? Mona Lisa painted by Leonardo da Vinci, right? I gave you the answer that's on the board. But about 10 to 15 years after they painted Mona Lisa, Da Vinci had another drawing. And this is part of the UK Royal Collection Trust. We call that Leonardo's Dragon. The title that's given to it is called Cat, Lions, and the Dragon. And here you have him drawing all these cats and some lions, and in the center you have a dragon. And all these cats are in different poses, trying to show how flexible all these creatures are in real life. But that's the dragon here. Let's zoom into that, shall we? Look at that. Reminds you very much of some of the dinosaurs that we are actually familiar with today. So that's Leonardo da Vinci. Let's go to the UK. Let's go to England. In England, there is a cathedral, Carlisle Cathedral, that was built long ago. And in the 15th century, so late 1400s, there was a bishop of the church, a minister of the church. And when they died, they buried him under the floor of the choir. So this is his tombstone. If you go to the church, lift up the carpet, this is what you see. And on the metal strip on the outside, we actually have animal engravings. Engravings like eels, dogs. The dog has a collar, look at that. Fish, birds, and then we have that in the center. What's that? Two long-necked dinosaurs. And what is interesting is this. The dinosaur on the left is a long-necked dinosaur, but it's different from the one on the right. The one on the left is a long-necked dinosaur, but it has 4 backward-pointing spikes. There's only one long-necked dinosaur with 4 backward-pointing spikes. It's the Spinosaurus. We can actually identify the species just from the engraving itself. Interesting thing is that Spinosaurus fossils are found in China. They're not found in England. Why? Because what formed the fossils? The flood. This represents where the creatures lived before the flood. But what we are looking at here, the Cambodian stegosaur, the Spinosaurus in England, this represents where these creatures live after the flood. Like this article say, if the evolutionary story of dinosaurs is true, then these creatures should have died out millions of years before human beings walked the earth. How could their images be engraved on a 500-year-old tomb in northern England? Good question, right? Like this cartoon say, hey, look, if people weren't around when dinosaurs were there, then who drew their pictures? But you say to me, oh, come on, don't the fossils themselves prove that they are millions of years old? We already show you that fossils can be made very quickly if you have a worldwide flood. But let's go back to 2005. 2005, Dr. Mary Schweitzer, she's an evolutionist. She found this huge T-Rex bone, very big. Brought it to her lab, they broke it open, and guess what she found? T-Rex red blood cells. Look at that. As they begin to look at it, they find, hey, it's not only T-Rex, they find it in other dinosaurs as well. Duck-billed dinosaurs, Triceratops, and again, T-Rex. Look at that. And then she took the bone and she dissolved away the mineral. And what was left, she said it was flexible and resilient. And when stretched, returned to its original shape. Original dinosaur soft tissue. Look at that. Look at those at the top. I like to joke, I said that reminds me of beef jerky. Anyone feeling hungry today? Look at that. And at the bottom right, you see the red blood cells there. Mary Schweitzer, she's an evolutionist, so she said this. It was exactly like looking at a slice of modern bone. But of course, I couldn't believe it. I said to the lab technician, the bones, after all, are 65 million years old. How could blood cells survive that long? Well, Dr. Schweitzer, could it just be that maybe those bones are not 65 million years old? As they begin to look at it more, they begin to find osteocytes. So these are bone cells. Look at that, bone cells, still there in the fossil. And you see that green and red thing? What's that? That's DNA. Double helical DNA, get a positive stain. You need double helical DNA of a certain length. Skeptics come along, they say, that's contamination. No, it's not contamination because the DNA is only found in the nucleus and nowhere else. This is dinosaur DNA. She said, I just got goosebumps because everybody knows these things don't last for 65 million years old. As the fossils dissolved, transparent vessels were left behind. It was totally shocking. I didn't believe it until we've done it 17 times. 17 times? Who does an experiment 17 times? That's a complete waste of money. So why did she do it 17 times? Because remember, she's coming to these bones with the idea of millions of years, and she knows that what she's finding before her very eyes just doesn't make sense in such a paradigm. She said, after we had the data, I didn't publish for over a year. I was terrified. When was the last time you see a researcher being afraid to publish? They want to publish. That's where they get research funds. But in another interview, she said that she knew that the moment she published this, her fellow evolutionists would attack her. And that's exactly what they did. Why would they attack her? In fact, she said that her research funding was cut, and she had only enough funding to research for 1.5 years more because she had an anonymous donor that came alongside her, giving her some extra money. Of course, later on, she was able to secure more funding. But why would a fellow evolutionist be so upset with her? I think we know the answer. This is Mary Schweitzer on 60 Minutes. Listen to what she said. And again, this video is a bit grainy because this is actually from the 1990s, all right? 1990s. So bear with that. Let's see if we can get this running.
Mary put some fragments of the bone in acid to dissolve away the outermost layer of mineral. But the acid worked too fast, and all the mineral dissolved away. Being a fossil, there should have been nothing left. But there was, and it was elastic, like living tissue.
This is the piece.
No.
She showed us video she took under the microscope.
That's really what happened?
Yes.
That's the dinosaur
Yeah.
bone?
Without mineral now. That's what was left.
It looked like the soft tissue she would have expected to find if it had been modern bone. This was impossible. This bone was 68 million years old.
So you see this and you think, what? You
I didn't want to tell anybody.
that you'd be ridiculed,
Yes.
right?
And so I said to my technician, okay, do it again. I don't believe it.
And yet, in sample after sample, they were there. Things that looked suspiciously like flexible, transparent blood vessels. She finally mustered the courage to tell Jack.
She said she dissolved the bone away and there were blood vessels. And, you know, I was like shocked. I mean,
How could that be?
How could that be? That's right.
The things Mary was finding inside dinosaur bones,
Look at that.
blood vessels, and even what seemed to be intact cells, pose a radical challenge to the existing rules of science, that organic material can't possibly survive even 1 million years, let alone 68 million.
Did you hear the irony in the last sentence? Science tells us that these things cannot last for 65 million years old. But they still, if you want to believe in that, I have news for you, you're being unscientific. See, friends, science tells us that these things cannot be 68 million years old. But do they ever question the millions of years? No. They always appeal to some unknown science out there. Then they begin to find proteins in there. Stable proteins like collagen, but also delicate proteins like elastin and laminin in what they claim was a bone that's 80 million years old. And later on, they claim to find collagen in the bone that they claim is 195 million years old. Do you know what's the problem with that? We can actually measure how long these things take to break down. And secular scientists, this is in their own publication, so you're using their own numbers. They tell us that if you freeze collagen down, the maximum theoretical limit, you see, can only slow down the decay by so much. The chemical bonds will still break down over time. The laws of thermodynamics, it will still decay. 300,000 years to 900,000 years, and all the collagen bonds will be gone. It'll be gone. I think this is too generous, but we'll just use this number because this is what the evolutionists themselves publish. But friends, how can we find that in a bone that's 195 million years old? Dinosaurs, they live in freezing liquid nitrogen. If they live in climates like ours, guess what? In 15,000 years, all the collagen would be gone. This is a huge problem for evolution. She says this, when you think about the laws of chemistry and biology and everything else that we know, say it should be gone. It should be degraded completely. Do you see what she's saying? Science tells us that these things cannot be millions of years old. The skeptics come along, they like to say, oh, you Christians, you cannot explain the science. So you say God must have done it. You have a God of the gaps. You ever hear that? No, it's the opposite. Science tells us that these things we can measure in the lab cannot be millions of years old. If you want to believe it's millions of years old, I have news for you. You are being unscientific. This is an evolutionist evolution of the gaps. So over the years, skeptics have come up with all kinds of explanations for how they can explain these things lasting for millions of years, and more than half a dozen of them. Every single one of them has been refuted by their own fellow evolutionists. And for many years, Mary Schweitzer, if you go online, they still use this argument. She always talked about Fenton reaction, which is an iron preservation model. But just last year, she published a paper, and she's one of the co-authors there, that refute that very explanation. It doesn't work at all. In fact, it breaks things down faster than it would preserve it. So she refuted her own explanation. So how do the skeptics today explain it? Well, this is from a paper just a few years ago, scientific paper. Here they give you the explanation. It says this, although many analytical techniques have shown that organic material can be preserved in fossils for millions of years. How do they know that? Well, because we know the bones are millions of years. So look, they can be preserved, right? So they're really arguing in a circle there, right? But the second half of this sentence, they tell us the mechanism for how they can explain these things. It says, the geochemical factors that allow this preservation are not well understood. They have no answer. Here's another evolutionary dinosaur expert. Say bones do not have to be turned into stone to be fossils, and usually most of the original bone is still present in the dinosaur fossil. Here's another evolutionist, a biochemist this time around. He said that even if the T-Rex had died in a colder, dry climate, the hell's create environmental radiation would have degraded its body. Bones absorb uranium and thorium like crazy. You got an internal dose that will wipe out biomolecules. Well, what is he saying? He's saying that if for somehow you can freeze it down like what you mentioned, and somehow you freeze it down all the way, it still cannot last 1 million years because background radiation itself will destroy all those chemical bonds in less than 1 million years. I maintain a database with Dr. Brian Thomas. Dr. Brian Thomas is from the Institute for Creation Research. He got his PhD on ancient collagen. You can get a PhD in this area. It's well-established science. And in this database, we record all major science papers, top journals, Nature, PLOS ONE, and all that. All these papers that talk about ancient, according to them, millions of years old, ancient biomolecules that is still present in the fossil record. And every few months, we have to keep updating the database because they keep finding more and more new finds. So for example, how many do we have to date? We have 61 secular papers talking about original dinosaur biomaterial. And if you don't just look at dinosaurs, you look at extinct birds, fossilized bacterial layers and all that, we have 127 cases of ancient biomaterial still in the fossil record. Dinosaurs are the tip of the iceberg. It goes much deeper than that. So you already know by now I don't believe in millions of years. But if we use their millions of years, what do you think is the oldest sample that we have that have original biomolecules? Using their dates, 2.5 billion years. And they still find original biomolecules. Friends, they believe that when we dig down the fossil record, they're digging back in time, go all the way to the first life, and guess what? Original biomolecules. Huge problem for evolution. But friends, if the world is 6,000 years old, and the worldwide flood is the cause of most of the fossils that we see today, about 4,300 years ago, then this is exactly what we would expect to see. So dinosaur soft tissue, which history does it fit best with? Millions of years, or the Bible? Mary Schweitzer says this. So that leaves us with two alternatives for interpretation. Either the dinosaurs aren't as old as we think they are, or maybe we don't know exactly how these things get preserved. We show you that everything we know from science tells you that these things cannot be preserved that long. We can measure these things in the lab. So what's the other alternative? The dinosaurs aren't as old as evolutionists think they are. So in the last talk, I mentioned radiometric dating. I talked about potassium argon and how it doesn't work at all. But when you ask somebody, they say, what about carbon dating? Doesn't carbon dating show that the bones are millions of years? Well, it turns out that isn't the case. Carbon dating, or radiocarbon, is a method that's used to test bones that are young, not old. Why? Because the half-life of radiocarbon is so short. It's 5,730 years. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if any fossil is more than 100,000 years, all the carbon-14 would be gone. So if you find a fossil with carbon-14, we know that it is young, not old. It's less than 100,000 years. That's the upper limit. You follow with me? Scientists have actually carbon-dated dinosaur bones. And guess what they contain? Carbon-14. They are young. We can carbon-date coal and oil. They're carbon. They contain carbon-14. We can carbon-date diamonds, and diamonds, the bonds are so tight because they're so hard that contamination doesn't happen. And they contain carbon-14. They are all young. And earlier in this talk, I mentioned dinosaur DNA, right? To date, we have at least 3 papers, secular papers, that talk about finding dinosaur DNA. But DNA is unstable. In freezing conditions, again using their own numbers, in 6.8 million years, all the DNA would be gone. That's not even 1/10 of when they say dinosaurs died out. Multiple discoveries. And the dinosaurs live in climates like what we have today. In 22,000 years, all the DNA would be gone. So at Creation Ministries, we see that DNA stands for dinos, not ancient. So the discovery of original protein, DNA, and radiocarbon in dinosaur bones is a huge problem for evolution and the idea of millions of years. Friends, do you see why dinosaurs actually testify to the worldwide flood? So let me sum up what we have learned in this talk. A lot about dinosaurs, but we can sum up in four 4 points, B, C, D, and E. B stands for Bible. We show that the Bible just talk about dinosaurs. Job chapter 40, right? The tail like a cedar tree. We talk about land creatures being created on the 6th day. That's dinosaurs. Then we saw centuries of dinosaur artifacts to show you that they lived together with man and they only went extinct in more recent years. Then we look at the dinosaur fossils, the dinosaur bone beds, right? The necks bent backwards, the armored dinosaurs found upside down, and they all testify to us that there was a worldwide flood. And then finally, we saw evidence of a young Earth, original dinosaur biomaterial, soft tissue, DNA, radiocarbon, and all that. Friends, the Earth is young, and the Bible can be trusted. Do you see now why we say dinosaurs are missionary lizards? Train yourself in this way, in this area, and you can use this creature that's been used to promote the idea of evolution, and you turn it on its head and use that to share the gospel with your friends. So I know many people, they hear that and they harden their hearts and say, I choose not to believe. Well, most people never get to hear all this information, but there's another group that harden their hearts and they say, I choose not to believe. And it's like this atheistic philosopher here. And I want you to notice what he said. He said this, I want atheism to be true, and I'm made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers. It isn't just I don't believe in God and naturally hope I'm right in my belief. It's that I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that. Why? Because if there's a creator, we are his creation. God has the right to tell us what is right and wrong. And one day, whether you like it or not, we will all stand before God to give an account for our life. We cannot live our life any way we choose. We have to live our life for God. There are consequences to ideas. But you can choose to be like this guy, cover your eyes and say, I choose not to believe. That doesn't change a thing, because one day we are going to stand before God. And if you're like this guy, then one of the most important things you can do is really to get your life right before the Lord. Because one day we are going to give an account to our Creator. So earlier on, I said that if you're interested in dinosaurs, check out Creation Magazine. There's normally, I think, in most cases, at least one dinosaur article in almost every issue. The Creation Answers book, top 60 questions in 20 chapters, one whole chapter on dinosaurs, chapter 19 in there. And I'll be at the back answering questions. Don't feel shy to come up to me to ask me questions. I'm here to answer questions. If you know kids who are in middle school and above, this is a book, Exploring Dinosaur in Mr. Heap. There's also one on geology. And this is my talk that's very similar to what you hear today on dinosaurs. I gave this talk at a conference a few years ago. It's a lecture. And again, our DVD players, our DVDs all have a QR code. So if you don't have a DVD player, you can still scan the QR code and watch that on your phone or stream that to your TV. And of course, here is my favorite book next. And I'm a bit biased here because I'm a co-author of this book. But this is really written for high school and above. This is our most comprehensive book on dinosaurs that's written for high school and above. It is written to be easy to understand. It's not going to be technical, but we cover a lot more details. So have you ever wondered, are there feathered dinosaurs? 2 whole chapters in there. How did dinosaurs go extinct? 1 whole chapter in there. I mean, why doesn't the asteroid theory work? Right? So why would the asteroid kill off all the big dinosaurs, yet delicate beasts and butterflies survive? Doesn't really make sense. So we address those things in there. We have another thing too that's interesting. If you want to go more in depth, go on our website. But we also have an upcoming conference in Colorado. We call that Layers of Faith. This is a geology and paleontology conference. And here we can actually go more in depth, looking at some of these fossils. You'll be going in the field. You can actually see some of the dinosaurs in the field itself as well. So this is in Colorado. If you're interested, go on the website and look up Layers of Faith conference in July. So again, lots of interesting stuff out there. Don't forget to go to creation.com because it's free and that's available to every one of us. So I'd like to end, if you haven't realized after the first session, I'd like to end most of my sessions with a Bible verse. So we saw that God made dinosaurs. We saw that God confronted Job with dinosaurs. So what was Job's response? He humbled himself. And Job said this, Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. When God confronted Job with dinosaurs, Job humbled himself, he repented, he looked at the rest of creation, and he turned around and he glorified God. Friends, the next time you think of dinosaurs, don't think of strange-looking animals and plants and a volcano in the background. Don't think of that. Think of this passage. When you think of dinosaurs, turn around, look at God and what he has done, and glorify him for his creation. And with that, I'll end this session. Thank you.